Hello everyone, it's Chad. Today I want to talk about misconceptions of ENTJs and why ENTJs are seen to be such jackasses. Well, the truth is ENTJs are jackasses, but there's a reason why, and understanding that reason is absolutely critical to understanding the ENTJ mentality, to building relationships with the ENTJs, to understanding our direct motive on why we prefer to be that way. In the beginning of life, our dominant function, your extroverted thinking function, is going to be the most fast. It's the function that's developed first. We structure, we order, we organize, we compile data, we move forward. We're focusing on an end result. However, as we move through life, we're developing this intuition. Then we develop this extroverted sensation, and then we have this inferior function called introverted feeling. A lot of times we get so involved in the extroverted thinking that we're not able to understand introverted feeling. An immature ENTJ is still going to structure the environment like a mature ENTJ. The only difference is that touch with FI or not. When you have an immature ENTJ, they're going to be jackasses simply for the sake of showing that they're better than you. Now, when you have a more mature ENTJ, it's less about showing that they're better than you and more about showing you where you could be. ENTJs are objective, unconsciously, at least semi-mature ENTJs, is more about creating a standard in which we bring others to. One of my closest friends, he said that the best way to describe me personally, and probably every other ENTJ that has a reasonable sense of maturity, not that I'm the most mature ENTJ I know, but he said this. He said, "You are an assertive individual with values that call people to a higher place." And that's exactly what defines an ENTJ. So the big part about it is ENTJs do like money. They do like being direct, straightforward, and they don't like sugarcoating things. And why is this? Number one, it's because we are SE dominant, or not SE dominants, but SE users. We prefer to call things exactly as they are at face value, yet we can read into things because of our intuition. However, that's not exactly why we choose to be direct. We choose to be direct because we feel like if we don't give the information straightforward, that you're not going to read it the way that it needs to be read. You're not going to understand it at a level that it needs to be understood. When we say this is the standard, you're here, and we want you here. And that's really what it's about. It's about calling individuals to move to that higher place. We look at people with intuition, and naturally we want to structure and order. So here's how it works. Extroverted thinking looks at society, looks at people, and we're perceiving information with intuition. I see where someone can go. We're intuitive preferences. We prefer that over sensation. So it's less about where you are, and it's more about where you go. Again, we want to order and structure. So we feel like it's our duty to take you to that fullest potential, as long as our introverted feeling is developed, or at least somewhat, or in touch with it. We want to call individuals to a higher place. An immature ENTJ may want to do the same thing, but they may feel like the higher place is being just like them versus that person reaching their own fullest potential, whether that person wants to be an artist, whether that person wants to be an astronaut, whether that person wants to be a business person. It doesn't matter. We want that person to fully understand where they can be and where they are. So really developing that and really getting that perspective is our ultimate objective. Now, that is not without its flaws. The first flaw is we prefer to do it with action. We like to spend less time talking and more time doing. So that's directly stating the obvious, which is we like to show it. ENTJs typically have this bravado element to them where we want to show people and individuals that we have gone to a certain place, that we are at that place, we are where you could be. So this comes off as arrogant, it comes off as cocky, it comes off as being a jackass. Okay, that's fine. But at the core level, you've got to understand why we're doing it. It's not because we just like to show off. There's usually a hidden motive. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you're going to a reunion. Let's say that you're going to something that you haven't seen people in maybe 5 to 10 years. The ENTJ is the one that's going to let everyone know where they are and versus where they were. They're the person who's going to say, hey, I got here, Here's how I did it. They may not necessarily rub it in your face, but you may feel that way depending on what type you are. The good news is, deep intuitive preference people can usually read into that and understand why the ENTJ is doing this. People who are less intuitive are going to have a more difficult time and naturally perceive the ENTJ as being arrogant or cocky or think they're better than everyone else. And most of the time, ENTJs do typically have that problem. They do get to rub off the idea that they are better than everyone else, and that's really unfortunate because it is our hidden desire to truly make other individuals better. I don't find a lot of ENTJs on YouTube. Extroverted thinkers are trying to make things in reality. I've had a lot of people question my type. I've been called ENTP, I've been called ENFJ, I've been called all kinds of things. And the people ask questions like, why are you doing these things? Why do you talk about how people feel? Why do you talk about emotions a lot? Well, one of the reasons is because A, talking about emotions helps me understand my own. B, talking about emotions helps other people get out of the same bind that I was in for so long without knowing Myers-Briggs. I used to hold myself accountable to everything. Like, why are you this way? Why are you so cold? Why are you so ruthless? Why don't you care? And now understanding Myers-Briggs had freed me from that perception. It has freed me from the idea that I was just a messed up individual. Instead, it embraced that side of me and allowed me to look at each function and say, you know what, that was the problem. I can develop this function now. So going back to my point, ENTJs, they're all at different levels of development. You may have one that doesn't care about changing anyone else around him. But truthfully, most ENTJs want to lift others up. You can generally always tell an ENTJ by them not, let's say ENTJs typically will root for the underdog. They will reach out for the person who's underneath, the person who's struggling, and generally they want to provide a mentorship type role to those people. ENTJs are surrounded by their special group. They don't have 10, 15, 20 cliques of people they usually can spend time with. They have a very small group of people. And that's because A, the ENTJ surrounds themselves with people that can improve themselves, or they surround themselves with people that they can improve. And usually it's a mixture of both. And it's usually a small group. ENTJs are not known to have hundreds and 500s of friends. Sure, they're going to have a lot of acquaintances. They're going to create a powerful network. They're going to have a lot of people they could call at any time and say, hey, can you help me out with this? Help me out with this. But truthfully, that's more of an ESTP personality. The STP creates relationships with many different types of people, and they're not as concerned with being selective about the people they're spending time with. That is not a flaw on either part. It's just a different style. You can recognize an ENTJ because they're usually the ones that are rooting for the underdog, trying to bring someone to a higher place. The key word I use for this is they have this leader syndrome where they just want to uplift others. Even early in my life, I was 15, 16, 17 years old. I was with my friends and I was always trying to bring people up to a different level. ENTJs typically don't have addictions to drugs. They don't have addictions to anything. We're focused on uplifting other people. So even in a group of friends, if an ENTJ is surrounded by 5 people who do drugs, the ENTJ would be the one who doesn't. And that's not 100% true, but it's very common with ENTJ type personalities. Again, it's highly dependent on the Enneagram, but ultimately it's a misconception to think that ENTJs are just being jackasses because they enjoy being jackasses. They don't. Well, they get a thrill out of toying around with a lot of the ideas, but ultimately it's about uplifting others or showing someone where they could be. You can be here. If I was started here and now I'm here, you can do the same. Let me mentor you. ENTJs want to push people forward, and they're not the only types that do that, except they're more direct about it. A lot of types will emotionally support others. A lot of types will give some people practical advice, especially any extroverted thinker, ESTJs, INTJs, you get the picture. ENTJs, very, very much driving people forward. And it's very common, more common in ESTJs and ENTJs than anything. The difference between how an ESTJ mentors and an ENTJ mentors is pretty significant. An ESTJ will mentor based on what they know works, based on what they think is practical. ESTJs, and this is not 100% truth, as in it's across the board, but I will say this: ESTJs have the tendency to put people in the same course that they went through simply because it has worked successfully in the past. Example, ESTJ parents pride education. They prize it more than a lot. And not saying education's a problem, but let's say the ESTJ parent as of today, to date, is 50 years old and that their kid is 10 years old or 12 years old and they're pushing their kid for college, and this college is a big deal to the ESTJ. And of course, granted, it is important. But an ESTJ will say, hey, I did this in college. I did gymnastics, so you need to do gymnastics. I did tennis, so you need to do tennis. I did this, so you need to, I did the President's Club, so you need to do this. I did this culture club, so you should do this. They're doing it based on what worked personally for them. That is one of the things that is indicative of SI. ENTJs will try to tap into that potential, and then this is, again, tendency. It doesn't mean it's necessarily true 100% of the time, but they will attempt to tap into that potential and find out where that person fits. Their own kids, they'll say, okay, she's a better dancer than she is a musician, so let's put her in dance, not so much focus on the music. So ENTJs will have a little more flexibility. They're unconventional in that type of thinking. So they don't like to follow the status quo. They may not say education is the most important thing. Even I don't think it is for children of today. And so the point is, you're going to see some differences in the way they do that. But ultimately, both types do want to bring people up, and they do successfully. There's nothing wrong with the traditional route. Eventually, the child becomes an adult and finds their own way and still makes it work. It's just a difference in you being able to recognize ESTJ or ENTJ. And STJs can eventually, their tendency is going to be different. It's going to be like an STJ will say, you know what, that's not working, I'll change. It's not like STJs are not adaptable. They are. That's a very common stereotype for STJs, which I'm going to talk about at another time. But NTJs naturally will tend towards being unconventional, and STJs are a little more conventional in that regard. And that's not the sole difference between those two types, but parenting style, it's an example of some of the differences between the two. ENTJs will try to nurture the person in a way, their child in a way that they feel A, may fit their grand plan of things, or B, be the best for the child. ESTJs obviously want the best for their child too, and sometimes they feel like a little more rules and restriction would be helpful. So I don't think there's one way to parent correctly. I think there's a lot of different ways that are effective, and then I think there's ways that aren't as effective. Ultimately, again, both types want to bring that up. So with that being said, ENTJs have this natural tendency to want to bring people up, people they surround themselves with. ENTJs love discussions, not about gossip, but more about how you can improve from a situation, what you can do better. ENTJs are the ones that typically will go in the long monologues about how you can change that situation. And then people think, oh, they're control freaks. And many, many, many times they are. So it's not that they're wrong. Those people who are saying that are wrong. It's the ENTJ can get a little carried away with this drive to help people that it may feel a little bit restrictive, especially for FP types who are a little more free. So those are some examples of why we do what we do. It's masked by our desire to impress. It's masked by our desire to show that we are the best. We like to show it, and that's why, is because we want to show the standard. We don't want to just say, hey, you can do it. And that's a lot of SE confusion. That's a lot of immaturity on the ENTJ's part, and that's why they kind of want to do it. They want to be a little bit of show-offy, and that's typical. You're going to have to look over that part, because if you really understand their motive for doing it, then you begin to understand why the ENTJ does what they do. Anyway, that is one ENTJ misconception that needs to be cleared up. The second misconception that needs to be cleared up is the underlying idea that ENTJs are not movable. They're fixed. And they want to manipulate everybody around them. That's a pretty common misconception I've heard a lot about ENTJs. The control side of them. Yes, we do want to structure the environment. Yes, we do it because we want to find the most efficient way to do something. It's one single way, and that's the NI and ENTJs that drive for that absolute one rational way. And that's why ENTJs are very much called the rationals, along with INTJs, ENTPs, and INTPs. ENTJs looking for the best way to accomplish something. We don't want 5 ways, we don't want 20 ways, we want to narrow down. That's NI working at its finest. Narrowing down to the one possibility that we think is the most efficient. The difference between that and the INTJ is the ENTJ will not process all the information before they make the decision. They make the decision quickly and then compromise on the way. And why do you think that is? Is because TE, NI, SE. They make the decision, they process it, and then they adapt with SE. So the NI is the processing, and I may go, that's wrong, and the SE is, and they're willing to move with it after the fact. They're willing to confront changes as they go. But that's why it's structured in that way, and it's a beautiful structure. It works really well. It helps to have the introverted intuitive dominant to kind of say, you know what, this could happen, and this could happen. And so it's best that we plan and execute some contingency plans to make that not happen. And so it's good to have that break once in a while, because we're not always right, and we don't like admitting that. So, but that is the truth. If we were always right, we wouldn't need any other type in this world, but we do. Every other type is important. Many types struggle with that, and that's where they struggle thinking one type is better than another, or you're a disadvantage because you're one type. It's not true. All 16 types are critical to the success and the progression of the world. And understanding that it's a huge thing, especially for ENTJs who naturally think they're on top, and they're wrong. So with that being said, that's a big misconception about control. And yes, moving back to that topic, control is critical to us. It's not necessarily we want to control your life. We just want to control ours. We don't want to control how you influence us. And we don't want to be influenced by anyone else. We don't want people trying to implement control on our own lives. Me personally, being a Enneagram 8, that is my biggest fear, is being controlled by something else. Other ENTJs still struggle with that because they're extroverted thinkers, but Enneagram 8s really have that basic fear of being controlled by anything. So with that being said, we want to not instill control. We just want to control our environment, make sure that people aren't influencing us in ways that we do not want to be influenced. We also don't, Enneagram 8 ENTJs will stand out pretty much against every other type of ENTJ. Not necessarily stand out in this way of, hey, we win and you don't, but stand out in the way of they're pretty recognizable. They're recognizable because they don't have a lot of people they respect, nor do they have a lot of people that they seek as mentors. We do seek mentors, but it's less mentors because we don't like people influencing our life in ways that we don't feel like we don't want to be influenced. So Enneagram 8 ENTJs will be more introverted than the other ENTJ counterparts. Enneagram 3 ENTJs are very much more extroverted than Enneagram 8 ENTJs, who can be often confused for INTJs. But it doesn't mean that we really are. So, control on an Enneagram 8 is critical. On any other ENTJ, it's also very, very critical, but Enneagram 8, definitely the control is a major, major thing. However, we want to initiate control in the sense of protecting our environment, making sure that it's consistent with what we believe, and we also want to make sure that people are striving for their best. So I hope that clears up a few misconceptions about an ENTJ. And if you have any questions about ENTJs in particular, of course you can comment, leave a question, send me a message, whatever you feel works best. I hope that really provided value to you today, and we'll catch you next time. Thank you so much.